Hi, this is YouTube librarian Mike J. Dove and Sky. I'm going to be doing a couple of things, recitation and meditation. Recitation while reading Virtual Reality Church by Daryl L. Bach and Jonathan J. Armstrong, and meditation while wearing a PlayStation VR headset. I define recitation, spelled Recitation, as reading out loud a book. I define meditation as sitting without speaking. So I'm going to start with Virtual Reality Church. The Internet Revolution. Jonathan, was speaking to a small group of church leaders in Washington State about VR. Now, the changes that I anticipate this new technology will bring for churches and educational institutions. After the presentation, a retired missionary approached me with a question. This saint had spent 4 decades on the mission field in Papua New Guinea, translating the scriptures into one of the country's more than 800 languages. Picking up one of the dry eraser markers, the retired missionary began writing on the whiteboard. So let me get this right, he said, drawing out a timeline of the 20 centuries of Christian history. You're saying that the Roman roads in the 1st century created a way for the gospel to reach the whole Roman Empire. He scribbled a cross to represent the beginning of the Christian era. After Rome fell in the 5th century, Western Europe remained a center for Christian learning and tradition, he continued. And somewhere about that, he said, marking the middle of the 15th century, Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press in the 1450s, and this started the print age, eventually leading to the full flowering of the Reformation. And we have the rise of the railroad and the telegraph about here, he said, doodling his way through the 19th century. Which coincides with the apex of the British Empire and the Protestant mission movements. Then came mass media, radio, and television. He's like moving over into the 20th century. And what you're saying is that the rise of the internet and virtual reality is going to be the next chapter of the story. This missionary, who had lived the majority of his life in one of the least developed countries on earth, had seen the picture more clear than any of us. The world is both bigger and smaller than it used to be. The world's population is larger, and everyone maintains more complex social networks than we used to. But at the same time, everyone's reach extends further. And so we feel like everyone is closer to us than they need to be. Tom Goodwin could write in 2015, Uber, the world's largest taxi company, owns no vehicles. Facebook, the world's most popular media owner, creates no content. Alibaba, the most valuable retailer, has no inventory. And Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate. Something interesting is happening. Can we map out this revolution? Since the first appearance of the internet, sociologists of religion began comparing the epic changes brought about by the printing press to an anticipated set of changes in Christianity that the internet would produce. How can we get a handle on all of the technological changes taking place under our feet? To many commentators, it is clear that the internet revolution is the fastest expanding and broadest technological revolution in human history. In a mere 3 decades, the internet has developed from a single web page created by the British computer scientist Tim Berners-Lee in 1981 at CERN in Switzerland into the world's primary communication channel for almost everything. The internet was initially developed in a nuclear physics laboratory in order to serve as a specialized research tool for scientists. Yet it has become the way that most people on planet Earth shop, bank, experience entertainment, read news and product reviews, and countless other activities. Following the commercialization of the internet in 1985, the number of internet users worldwide skyrocketed. In 1985, there were about 16 million internet users worldwide. By 2001, this number climbed to over 500 million. Number of internet users worldwide crossed the 1 billion mark in 2005, which time this represented 15% of the world's population. By 2010, the number of internet users worldwide crossed the 2 billion mark, representing 29% of the world's population, and then 3 billion by 2014, representing 42% of the world's population. As of June 2021, there were over 4.8 billion internet users worldwide, representing over 62% of the world's population. It would be hard to exaggerate the breadth, depth, and suddenness of the internet revolution. At the very least, we could say that the advent of the internet has more profoundly affected the daily life of more people on planet Earth than any other invention in human history. What would its closest rival be? The invention of writing? We're clearly living in a unique juncture in history. The extent of the revolution may be measured by counting the global number of internet users, but the depth of the revolution, that is, the myriad ways that technology shapes our daily life, is not easy. We do know that technology is gaining ever-deepening influence in society. Not only are the lives of more people affected by the internet than ever, but their lives are affected in more areas than ever. As computers become faster and more capable of mimicking human interaction, their presence has become ubiquitous in every area of our lives. Presently, driverless cars are once a symbol of the revolution, one of its major frontiers, illustrating the depth of the social, economic, and cultural impact of the revolution. Around 2010, the scientific community was convinced that autonomous cars would remain impossible until deep into the future, and now we can't imagine a future that does not include driverless cars. As computer processing power has become ever faster and cheaper, the list of tasks that can be automated and entrusted to our digital personal assistants continues to grow. IBM's Deep Blue chess-playing computer lost in 1986 to Garry Kasparov, the world's then reigning champion. But 1 year later, in 1987, Deep Blue prevailed. A computer program developed by a team of dedicated scientists had defeated the world's leading chess champion and one of humanity's classic strategy games. Could computer programs begin to best people at other intellectual challenges? In 2001, IBM's supercomputer Watson challenged the undefeated Brad Reuter and Ken Jennings at Jeopardy, playing Jeopardy, requiring the computer to listen to and respond to questions in natural language, winning the highly publicized tournament with the answer, "Who is Bram Stoker?" in the category 19th-century novelist. The question, William Wilkinson, an account of the principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia, inspired his author's most famous novel. Watson could process 500 gigabytes of information per second, or about the equivalent of 1 million books. In an interview following the tournament, Brad commented, "I would have thought the technology like this was years away, but it's here now. I have the bruised ego to prove it," Ken Jennings said. "My past Jeopardy experiences have been great, but they weren't really weighty with this kind of technological, philosophical importance. I think we saw something important today. Since Watson's game show triumph in 2011, IBM has been focusing its attention on applying the computer program to improving medical care." Latest supercomputing feat in the litany came in 2017 when Google's AlphaGo topped the world's leading Go player. Go is a strategy game of mind-boggling mathematical complexity. It was invented in ancient China. IBM's Deep Blue became the world's chess champion 20 years earlier, and he said it was capable of evaluating 200 million moves per second. But his level of computing is magnitudes of order too little to play the game of Go. Effectively, Go has an unspeakable number of possible moves. To be precise, there are 10 to the 316th power possible moves in the game of Go. This means that Go has more possible moves than there are atoms in the visible universe. The game is so complex that it defies the if this then that type of programming that Deep Blue has been able to harness in order to excel at the game of chess. For AlphaGo to best the world's champion, the computer had to learn how to learn. Basically, the computer had to learn how to program itself, and the success of this project demonstrated that computers may be able to program themselves to accomplish other tasks that are too complicated for human programmers to reduce to a set of rules. At least for now, there's no end in sight to the limits of where the revolution is leading us. MIT professors Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee call this revolution the second machine age. If the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century began to replace the work of our hands and the work of machines, then the revolution that is now taking place all around us is replacing the work of our intellectual faculties with the work of digital computing. The analogy has limitations, but it points us in the right direction. When I began to prepare a sermon, I opened Logos Bible software and began studying scripture on my computer. Logos saves me hours of research time by performing a variety of search functions through the thousands of books in my digital library, tasks that have me combing the stacks of my seminary library for days at a time. Other lucid writers speak of the same basic transitions at play in our cultural moment by other names, what Brynjolfsson and McAfee call the second machine age. Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, calls the fourth industrial revolution. According to this analysis, the first industrial revolution came with the rise of steam power beginning in the 1760s, and the second came with the transition from steam power to electricity in the decades around 1800. The third industrial revolution marks the transition from mechanical and analog electronic presses to digital computing beginning in the 1950s. And the fourth industrial revolution represents the internet revolution and its continual unfolding with artificial intelligence from the 1997. In 2007, when Apple unveiled its first iPhone, it was about the only device consumers own that they refer to as smart. Increasingly, everything around us is becoming smart. That is, these devices automatically transmit data to the internet and modify their functions based on data that they receive back from the internet. We are crossing a threshold whereby the majority of the data pulsing through the internet is no longer person-to-person communication, such as an SMS text or an email, but sensor to cloud. For example, the data generated by the smart components in airplanes home security systems, and even our refrigerators. We are quickly moving to an era where the bulk of the information transmitted on the internet is data written by machines to be read by other machines. It used to be that we watched our movies and read our books. Now our movies watch us and our books read us. Our smart assistants listen to our conversations, ready to do our biddings at any time. The silent and invisible transmission of data at an inconceivable pace and scale around us is at the core of what the internet revolution is about. And VR is emerging as a new and compelling way for people to visualize and interface with those data streams. Since the rise of digital computers in the second half of the 20th century, we're watching as supercomputers that formerly only governments could afford have become consumer products in the span of a few decades. Thus, computers that once required the space of several tennis courts, the electricity supply of whole villages, and cost hundreds of millions of dollars, have become affordable to average consumers within a generation. For example, the Cray 2 became the fastest supercomputer in the world when it was released in 1985, and Apple's iPad 2, which was released in 2011, has an equivalent computing power. The Frontier supercomputer, scheduled to be operational by 2020, is projected to be the world's most advanced supercomputer with a computational output of 1.5 exaflops. That is the equivalent of the computing power of the 160 next most powerful supercomputers in the world combined. If the current trends continue, we could anticipate that in the year 2050, our grandchildren might unwrap as a Christmas present a device with technical specifications equivalent to the Frontier supercomputer. December 25th, 2050 falls on a Sunday after the festivities of opening gifts on Christmas morning. Will our loved ones get to their cars and drive to church service with this new device in their pocket? What will church service even look like? How will the experience of worship and faith on Christmas Day of 2050 continue the tradition of the Christianity that we know? What is VR and why is it important? In August 2012, new outlets and technology forums were buzzing with reports of consumer VR. A new company called Oculus had launched its Kickstarter campaign for a new virtual reality business, which Oculus's founder Palmer Luckey called the Rift. This Kickstarter campaign sparked hope that the dream of VR would become a consumer product in the near future. VR had become a popular theme in science fiction for some now, at least since Neil Stephenson's 1992 novel Snow Crash, which coined the term Venoverse, and the 1999 blockbuster film The Matrix. In fact, VR was not merely science fiction, but had been a working technology for some time. Yet, it was vastly too expensive and unwilling to be made into something that people could actually buy and use at home. In 1968, while teaching at Harvard and MIT, Ivan Sutherland invented the first VR display system. The contraption was so large and menacing that they called it the Sword of Damocles, named after the fabled sword that dangled at the head of the king in Greek mythology. In 1984, Jason Lanier founded VPL Research. It was generally regarded as the first company to develop and market VR products, such as VR headsets and haptic gloves. A quick review of the collection of products that Lanier developed way back in the 1980s will reveal why he is sometimes called the father of virtual reality. Not only did he coin the term virtual reality in 1978, but the products that VPL Research created 40 years ago are by and large the same as those on the market today, at least in terms of outer appearance and purpose. In the intervening years, computer processing power had accelerated significantly, so the level of detail in today's VR simulations is vastly greater, and the cost of the equipment had plunged downward. VPL's research VR system cost millions of dollars in the 1980s, and by 2003, when Jerry Balanson founded the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford University, a quality VR system cost notably less at about $100,000 per unit. Still, the basic concept of VR, users straps on a set of goggles in order to see stereoscopic imagery of a digitally created environment, has not changed over the past half century since Ivan Sutherland created the first VR system in the University Laboratory. Then, something rocked the tech world. Something that convinced not only gamers and geeks, but also investors that VR could soon become the next computing platform. In March 2014, Facebook bought Oculus for over $2 billion. On August 17, 2015, Time magazine ran the cover story, The Surprising Joy of Virtual Reality, when it's about to change the world. In October 2017, at Facebook's developer conference, Mark Zuckerberg stood in front of a giant screen and announced his company's bold goal, 1 billion people in VR. All of this generated a tremendous stir among creators and those interested in emerging media. Facebook released Oculus Quest 1 in May 2019, and the Oculus Quest 2 in October 2020. Although not the first VR headset released by Facebook, the Oculus Quest 1 and 2 were in many ways the first headsets to deliver what enthusiasts had been hoping for all along since the initial Kickstarter campaign in 2012. The Oculus Quest 1 and 2 were standalone VR headsets, meaning that they did not require a desktop computer operating. They had no wires tethering them to any additional equipment. They were completely portable and could be configured to any room almost instantly, whereas previous systems required several hours to install and collaborate. And at the base price of $399 and $299 respectively, they were praised as affordable. In an interview in 2015, Jeremy Balanson revealed that the VR lab at Stanford University had switched from its proprietary VR headsets costing tens of thousands of dollars to a $350 prototype released by Oculus. My lab is very quickly becoming, from a hardware standpoint, not as special as Balanson confessed. VR was becoming, for the first time, available to everyone. How do we define virtual reality? It's not easy to do. Jeremy Lanier, who knows VR almost as well as anyone, compiles no fewer than 52 definitions of virtual reality in his book. We're not technical specialists, but biblical scholars, and so for the most part, we are content to let the industry define for us what VR is. And of this, It will be helpful to identify some key features of VR display. VR is a computer interface, analogous to the computer screen, which has served as the primary computer interface for the past several decades, that is capable of receiving input and delivering output in 3 dimensions, some call VR spatial computing. And this is an apt name since VR allows the users to see and respond to data in a 3D environment. Basically, VR maps data over the top of a physical space and allows users to be actors in a digitally created world by their emotions and manipulation of the real world. For many people, the experience of VR is like stepping into the computer world, and one can suddenly see all around artifacts that used to be visible only to the computers. Someday, in the not too distant future, young people will be shocked to learn that our experience of computers was once limited to rectangular windows about 12 inches wide. While we will reserve the terminology of virtual reality or VR for head-mounted display systems, we will use the term virtual somewhat more loosely, competing with the ways that hospitals and schools now offer virtual appointments. We will speak of virtual technology is any internet-based platform for group communication and interaction. At the present moment, tech companies tend to distinguish rigidly between VR and AR, augmented reality. In our view, these differences, which companies use to distinguish product lines from one another, will likely fade in the future as people begin to locate the real usefulness of the underlying technology. Some explain AR by calling it headphones for the eyes, and this may point to a realistic vision of the future. When you walk through an airport terminal or down a busy city sidewalk today, you'll see that many people are wearing a pair of headphones or have in their ears a set of earbuds. Everyone is moving to and fro on the same walkways and in and out of the same stores and couches, but everyone is engaged in their individual audio program. In the near future, it may be that everyone will walk around wearing AR glasses, seeing and interacting with their own visual realities. Like the other technologies discussed in this book, AR has been around for some time. Augmented reality entered public consciousness in 2012. When Google released its Google Glass Explorer edition for $1,500, but the project was premature and canceled by 2015. Nevertheless, almost all the tech giants had invested significantly in the research and development of AR and seemed poised to release a panoply of AR devices in the years ahead. While we may think of AR as perhaps even more futuristic than VR, the reality is that many of us already use a primitive form of AR every day when we access the Navigator app on our smartphones. When you enter an address into your smartphone and follow the real-time driving directions that it provides to your destination, you may not think of this as augmented reality, but it is. Your smartphone maps data over physical spaces, and then you interpret the real world based on the instructions, and you say, what would happen if, instead of receiving these real-time driving directions on the screen of your smartphone, this information was beaming straight onto the lenses of your glasses? This is the premise of AR. The distinction between virtual reality and augmented reality is currently emphasized by tech companies as they jockey for greater market share of this emerging industry. But for the purposes of this book, we see VR and AR is essentially the same technology. VR is emerging first, as the technical challenges in creating VR are fewer and more achievable for compelling AR. In this book, we will explore how the church can apply VR technology for the purposes of Christian ministry, knowing that AR is not far away and will bring many of the same opportunities and challenges. Their definition was pretty impressive. VR is a computer interface analogous to the computer screen, which has served as the primary computer interface for the past several decades, that is capable of receiving input and delivering output in 3 dimensions. Some call VR spatial computing. This is an app name since VR allows the users to see and respond to data in a 3D environment. Basically, VR maps data over the top of physical space, allows users to be actors in a digitally created world by their emotions and manipulations in the real world. So I thought that was a pretty impressive definition by Daryl L. Bach and Jonathan J. Armstrong. I myself probably just only recently made the distinction between VR and AR. Okay, so I read it. That recitation is just reading it out loud. You'll have to think about it, try to figure it out. So, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know if I'm supposed to go to sleep. Hold on, I gotta get a new controller.